Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're going to give ourselves a few minutes to allow people to join us on Facebook and on YouTube. So while we get ready, to start, let's allow a few minutes for people to join our conversation. So please do share on your Facebook pages and if you forgot to remind people that we have started or we are starting, please do remind them to join the conversation. We want to have as many people engaging with us on this as possible. So let's just give it a few minutes and we will then start.
CEO, may I ask Connor to send again the poster? I never got the poster, so I've had nothing to share on my platforms.
Oh, okay, yeah. She's listening. She's in the background. She will do that. Good morning, Busiso. Thank you for joining. You can also, if you go to Soul City,
May I ask Connor
Busiso, thank you for joining. Okay, there's feedback. If you go to our Facebook page, you will be able to see it and you can share to your own Facebook page.
Okay.
As you join colleagues on Facebook, please do say hi, because for us we want to see, who's engaging with us. If you are from any organization, you can also indicate which organization you are from, for us to acknowledge our partners and the organizations that support the work that we do. So please do indicate in the comment section who's joining, from what organization, and we can then acknowledge those organizations. Okay, so I think we are good to start. It's a Thursday morning in Joburg. It's a bit cloudy, and I hope all of us are having, a beautiful day even in this cloudy day. I want to welcome everyone, and I want to upfront thank the panelists who are joining me in this conversation and to appreciate them taking time to join us. And I see that the Soul City team is joining in the conversation. Thank you very much, colleagues, for joining. So I'm going to, ask us to introduce ourselves, but I wanted us to sort of set the scene for why this conversation is important to us as Soul City, because we identify as an intersectional feminist organization, and an organization that is committed to doing social justice work. And in our work, what we've seen is that, the realities and the experiences of young women in particular, and boys, are shaped by patriarchy. So in that, we find that there is, oppression, there is discrimination, there is exclusion on the basis of ability, on the basis of gender. And we also find that because our societies are patriarchal, we find that young women are not able to then enjoy their freedoms that the constitution of our country guarantees them. Their bodily autonomy is something that they never get to enjoy, because there's dictation in terms of how they should dress, who they should have sexual relations with, how they when and how often they should have partners, and sexual relationships. So that policing of their bodies, and also dictating, what they need to do, is in a way a denial of their rights. And for us, when we looked at where the problem is, we found that patriarchy then is this problem that all of us must commit to solving. And whether we can solve it is another uh, topic for another platform. But I think maybe even in this platform we can start looking at, can we dismantle patriarchy? If we can, how can we do that? So I have guests who are going to help me answer this question. And I even said to them as we were preparing, I don't think this is a once off. Today, we are just introducing the issue, but we might find ourselves having to go back to this conversation because the system is so entrenched. And when you want to, kill a big elephant, you take it chunk by chunk, piece by piece. You don't aim to drop the whole elephant all at once. So today we are just going, I think, to touch base on what is it that we can do in our different spheres. But maybe as we continue throughout the year, we can see then how we go back to this conversation and how does it then translate into programs that we implement in different communities. So I'm going to ask my panelists to join me in introducing themselves. And when you introduce yourself, let me ask you to talk to us about what patriarchy is. And for you personally, how has it manifested in your personal space, in your workspace? And Tlengiwe, you are the first one that I see on my on my left. So I'm going to pick on you to introduce yourself and tell us, what patriarchy is to you and how does it manifest in your space.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone who's joining us on this conversation. CEO, I feel like you're putting me on the spot, but now that I'm here now, it's okay. I'll join the conversation. So I'm Hlengi Wendlo, and I define myself as an academic, an activist, a political analyst, and a facilitator at the same time. I work a lot on the space of gender, and I also teach at university, and a lot of my work revolves around issues of gender and gender equity. So, in terms of how patriarchy manifests itself on my own space, and here, because we're doing introductions, I'm just going to just give a brief outline in terms of where I see patriarchy in my own work, but also in my own research. So, in my own work, because I'm working with women, I divide spaces where everyone battles with patriarchy into 4 different spaces, and I call those battlefields. And those are battlefields for me because that's where women in the everyday they wake up to battle with the patriarchy. Well, because patriarchy is so daring, but there is always a pushback to patriarchy. In a move to attain a just society. And one of the biggest problems is the misunderstanding of patriarchy as hate for men. And this is one of the biggest struggles against the patriarchal domination because most people do not understand patriarchal domination as a systemic form of violence. But once you raise the word patriarchy, or you are equated to a feminist, and feminism is always equated to hate to men. But in dividing these 4 battlefields, the first battlefield for me is the home, the family space where women always battle with patriarchy in the everyday of their lives through socialization. And this form of socialization are those norms that are passed by the older generation of women, even from one generation to another, in terms of how we are constantly told that men do not cry. This is what men do, and this is what girls do as young as we are growing up. And that's one problem that I identify. The second battlefield for me is the society, is the community where one grows. So as much as the family is the immediate space of socialization, community also, because it takes a village to raise a child. When umama was next door says, why are you outside as a girl around this time? So those are different ways, I mean, of drumming in patriarchy and saying patriarchy must rule and all of that, while the ultimate goal is to ukwakha abantwana, to build a community, but it is problematic the way it's done, because it's done in different in a patriarchal way. And the third space for me is the society, where we wake up in the morning to do our everyday work, at the workplaces, at school, and all the spaces that we occupy. Because if you look at even the leadership itself, people who occupy important positions. And if you look even within the political spaces as part of society, ask yourself whether South African society is ready for a woman president. You look at the delegation of people who are going to the conference, majority of them are women, but the agenda is completely different. It's anti-women, because we've been told and socialized with the idea that women can't lead and all of those things. And then the final battlefield for me is the state, in terms of the rules and regulations, the policies that are put in place. Sometimes you have this whole idea of 50-50, but is the state even prepared, I mean, to make sure that the 50-50 in itself is achieved practically, because representation is very important. So most of the time it's lip service to say this is ought to happen, but there are no mechanisms in place that are ensuring that all those things that are outlined, they are really implemented, and they are seen to achieve the goal of what is supposed to be done. So for me, in my workspace, those are four different battlefields where women constantly battle patriarchy in their everyday form of survival, but also form of resistance, a pushback to patriarchy, to say we are fighting for a just, for an equal world. Thank you. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Hlengiwe, and I can hear, the frustration even in your voice in terms of how this system is limiting and prohibiting women to progress and to achieve greatness. We are also joined by someone that, for me, when I first met her, we met in a space where all of us were advocating for the rights of people, of PLHIV, people living with HIV. And in that space, the voice that she came with was very authoritative in challenging the status quo. And as you say, Hlengi, the status quo is mainly patriarchal in design, and when you hear a woman speak with a loud voice, and not a loud voice as in loudness, but authority, in a space where men are, and challenging them, almost swearing at them. And I think she threw in some swear words, to be honest, if I remember. you know and but also being listened to. Then you see how we have power as women, and when a space allows, we are able to exercise that power. So I'm going to ask Yvette to introduce herself, and speak to us about what patriarchy is, what is her understanding of patriarchy, and how has she seen it manifest in the spaces where she's doing her activism. Over to you, Me.
Thank you so much, Fina, and welcome everyone. What a nice introduction, Fina. I thought you were going to be nice and introduce me as this nice person. My name is Yvette Raphael, and I am the Executive Director of Advocates for the Prevention of HIV and AIDS in Africa. And I was born into a feminist, very matriarchal family, and I've never experienced patriarchy in the home. So in my family, everything, my granny was a feminist. Everything was fair and everything. There's 6 kids, tasks were divided. And wow, when I got into the real world, out of primary school, going to high school, it's where I realized that patriarchy is a system, patriarchy is well alive. And I was totally amazed. And I speak from the, that grounded voice, the streeters voice. I refuse to get tangled into, issues that are not real for me. So and I realized the system is one, very well funded, very well supported, and it has its what I would call patriarchal princesses, people who are women that are around it and feed the system, although it is so unfair towards women. And in my workplace, that in the work that I do, that is always what I push. I will make an example that there was when I realized in the work that we do, there's only one organization that was representing women living with HIV, and it was the one organization that was the most struggling with the issues, with funding, with getting a voice. And when I went into this organization, did I not realize that behind all of these women are men teaching us to, empower ourselves to be and think like men. So I say you cannot use the systems, the laws of patriarchy to build feminism, right? So all of these, attitudes and things that men do behind the scenes, like votes, like choosing one leader over another, those are all patriarchal. A feminist system is not built on that. Leaders are chosen, leaders volunteer, leaders take themselves to that. And to a patriarchal system, that is very much unheard of. Whereas me, as somebody who grew up in a feminist matriarchal world, for me that was easy to see and do. And that is how many, and you talk about where I work, Fina, and that is how many organizations where women are trying to build a feminist movement, to build and place space for women, are brought down, because behind us, behind women, are men that cheer us on to divide us. So women will never come together because this system is so silent, so invisible, but it is there. And men ensure, and patriarchal systems ensure that women never get along. That is why we demonize gossip. I go there. You demonize telling Fina, hey, they are behind you. Because then Yvette is seen as somebody who gossips. Meanwhile, you cannot tell a sister that things are not going on well for you. So where I work, I try and bring that down. I always say, in the work that we do as women, and I'm very active in the HIV prevention field. Locally, our problem is Black men, but internationally, our biggest problem is white males and gay men who speak on our behalf. Sometimes you hear them speak on issues that pertains to the vagina, and you ask yourself, hmm, you know me more than you know yourself. So I'll stop it there. Thank you so much, Fina.
I did say she's radical, right? So she's already showing us her true colors. And I want us, Yvette, as we continue with this conversation, for you to unpack what you mean by, you say locally the problem is Black men, and internationally the problem is white men and gay men. And we will get to that. Ntate Bafana, you are an activist, and one of the debates that we had even here at Soul City is: can men be feminists, or should we reduce their role in feminism to allyship? Can men be feminists? Are they just allies? And that's a question that I think still needs to be answered. But you also are a reverend, and one of the ways I personally know that patriarchy exists is how it plays itself in religious spaces. In fact, one of the questions I was asked in one of the platforms by a pastor, a Muruti, a bishop, was, Why do you want to change a system that was created by God? God created men and gave them authority and gave them the headship. And you feminists come and want to confuse the world and you want to change the world order as God intended. So my question to you, Ndate, as you introduce yourself, is, are we trying to, undo the work of God when we say we want to dismantle patriarchy? And maybe start by telling us what is patriarchy, and how do you see it manifest? And because you are a man, so we speak from a voice of women. So it would be interesting to hear from a voice of a man what patriarchy is and how it manifests.
Thank you, Fina, and thank you for allowing me into this space. My name is Bafana Kumalo. I'm with Sonke Gender Justice, and as you have indicated, I'm also a pastor in my other life. My colleague Masana describes herself as an imperfect feminist, and I like that labeling because it describes feminism as a process. I do think that, in the conversation around this important aspect, you find various layers of feminism. I mean, I travel a bit in my work and I listen a lot to, colleagues within the sector in the North describing the work that they are doing, which is very important, which resonates with what I believe in. But there are also disjunctures.
Yeah.
There are also differences of nuance and all of that. And Yvette's provocative opening, I think, begins to locate the conversation. Even as we talk about patriarchy, one needs to, I think, locate what vantage position you are engaging with this conversation. I should say, Fina, I'm a product of patriarchy. I have been socialized, as a young man growing up, to be privileged in lots of ways that I've always questioned in my life, why this kind of attitude towards me as a boy, and which I do not see extended to, female colleagues. I come from a family of 5 boys, and grown up, lost my mother when I was 8 years, a formidable woman, but reared by my father, who was uncharacteristic of fathers of the time. My father was the best cook at home. My father was neat, liked keeping the house clean. I learned to cook, to look after myself from my father. And so I've learned a lot from him in how, if you like, he was debunking what was the general norm of what a man is expected to do. When my mother died, my aunts, were all arguing that because I was the youngest, I must go with them to live with them, because it was not expected that a man can look after, an 8-year-old. And my father insisted that none of his children are going to be taken away. He's going to bring up his children. And so I take a lot from that experience where here is a man who, in the 60s, steeped in a patriarchal environment, because truth be told, we are still a very patriarchal society in South Africa. And I don't care who says what, we may have all this progressive legislation. The truth of the matter is that South Africa is a patriarchal society. And there's lots of evidence that we can peruse as we, go on with this conversation. And so I'm citing this because I think it has left an indelible impression in my mind around how I'm supposed to carry myself as a man, a young man, in a society that has already given me privileges. But I come from a family where my father was saying, look, don't take anything for granted. You have to put in the work so
Yeah.
that you also make your own contribution in society. And don't sit and wait for somebody to do things for you. You have to do things for yourself.
Yeah.
You need to be there to make a contribution to society, as a member of society. And fast forward, as a gender activist, I mean, before I even understood what it meant to be a gender activist, as a student leader in the struggle against apartheid, engaged with formidable women who were there in the trenches, mounting the struggles. I was struck at university when we had to elect a leadership, when my male colleagues, still sounded the mantra, let's achieve political freedom first, and then we will talk about this thing of, women in leadership. And that struck me to say, why is it fine for women to go out and do this dangerous work that all of us were doing, at least in the area where I was? But when it comes to leadership, we only have to relegate, you know, these comrades to minute secretaries, as we used to call them those days, and not as leaders, not as head of the SRC, for instance, in the university where I was, which is the debate that we were having. And I began to engage with my female colleagues to say, but this can't be right. What is it that we need to do? And how do we become allies, if you like, to use your term, in ensuring that we challenge some of these misnomers? Because you can't say, I do not support discrimination, but discriminate against others. For me, it just didn't make sense. And I began to read a lot on this. I began to have more conversation, to listen more to my female colleagues. And I think I learned a lot from that. I was humbled by, the struggles that women go through every day. Some things that as a man I took for granted, and it opened my eyes and began to challenge even my own thinking around what is it that I do as an activist within the context of the struggle. And so I define patriarchy, Fina, because you asked us to define. Patriarchy is the world seen by and through the eyes of men, to the benefit of men. And in that lexicon, women are seen as an incident. And therefore, you referenced your comment from your pastor, or your friend who's a pastor, which is, in my view, part of the problem we have. Because I can assure you, if you were to ask people in the church to define, the importance of creation, people will jump to Genesis 2. That don't forget you were born from the rib of a man. The narrative which begins to assume that the man was created first. And I find this very interesting because people jump Genesis 1:26, which says God created both male and female in
Yeah.
God's image. And
Yeah.
so in my book, equality is embedded in scripture. But of course, as men, we choose to read the Bible ideologically so that it affirms this patriarchal view. Now,
Yeah.
what does Genesis 21:26 says in the following? It says God created them both male and female, in other words, equal, and God gave both of them an instruction to be co-creators with God, subdue the world. He didn't say one is primary to the other. He didn't
Yeah.
give authority to anybody to the other. Where people talk about this thing of authority, they are jumping to the New Testament and referencing Paul on the main, And I like Paul because, I mean, we don't have a lot of time. But Paul says, I was inspired when I got the inspiration that on the night in which Christ was betrayed, this is what he did. In other words, he is telling something that was an inspiration and he had learned. But then Paul says in Timothy, I, as Paul, say. So Paul distinguishes between what is a general ideology, and what he himself believes. And many of the so-called teachings about, the role of women, that women must sit and not ask questions in church, as you'd find in Timothy, those are teachings that Paul is teaching himself. Those are not necessarily what God has defined the relationship between men and women. And the liberated Paul in later writings says there's neither Jew nor Gentile, there's neither male nor female. We are all one in Christ. So I think we need to be careful when people of faith say, well, the Bible says, because you must begin to ask, where are they referencing and why are they choosing that part of scripture to confirm their own prejudices? And the church, I must confess, is one of the most patriarchal institutions. And we need to challenge that, because we cannot simply allow some of these distortions that continue to reinforce patriarchal views to reign the day. If one reads the scripture is very clear. All human beings are created in God's image, and all human beings must treat each other with dignity and respect, irrespective of gender, race, color, or creed. And that, for me, is the premise of my own theological predisposition. I'm sure we will
Thank
talk some
you.
more, but those were
Yes.
just my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's these, these principles that you outline that gives me confidence, as a person who follows the teachings of the Bible, to say I'm not wrong to call myself a feminist, because my understanding, of creation is what you outline. It's not that man is more powerful and higher than a woman. This spare rib narrative, that is used against us as women to try and keep us in our place. Remember, they will tell you of a Proverbs 31 woman, and they will tell you of submission. So I'm happy that, from the perspective of the man of the cloth, a man who understands the Bible, you are saying to us we must debunk the myth that, the headship of men is something that was created by God. I differ with that, and I'm happy that I'm not alone in that debate. Let's go to you, Sis Nozi. We know that traditional leaders, same as religious spaces, with in tradition, we also find this system being enabled and actually even being used to, to keep women quiet, to keep women subdued, and you can't say anything as a woman. You even you know your body is somebody's controlling it. You must wear a doek, you must cover your knees, you must cover your what. Hey, I see that degree. You can't speak to men, looking at them in the eyes, you must be covered. So many rules, and so many things being done and being said to women about their bodies and about, who they are. So you work for Salga, and we would want to hear more from you in terms of, in your engagements with traditional leaders, in communities. How do you see patriarchy manifesting, and what does it mean to you? And introduce yourself, me, and tell us what you do, Kosalga.
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to you as the facilitator of this session, and to my colleagues that are in the conversation. A very important conversation, I must say, and I really appreciate that you have involved Salga. I am Nozibele Makanda. I am the portfolio head for health, community services, and inclusivity at Salga, and I'm here because I do lead the issues related to gender equality, and women, and right across all the vulnerable groups. Well, maybe before I even get to talking about traditional leadership and the system, as you have already indicated, that let us maybe just look at what we see patriarchy patriarchy is and how have we experienced it in our lives. And so for me, from a feminist point of view, I subscribe to the definition that says patriarchy refers to male dominion both in public and private spheres, and that feminists may usually use the term patriarchy to describe the power relationship between men and women. And that becomes for me, from a feminist point of view, the definition of patriarchy. But then from a gender point of view, it then, as Dr. Hlengiwe has indicated earlier, is a system of relationships, beliefs, and values embedded in political, social, and economic systems that structure gender inequality between men and women. And these attributes that would be like those that are seen as feminine or pertaining to women are undervalued, whilst those that are regarded as masculine or pertaining to men are highly prized, and thus making men to be the more privileged of the two sexes, which is rather unfortunate. From a personal point of view, I grew up in rural areas, and my father, like as the patriarch of the home, I never experienced a patriarchy in the home, because growing up, I never really could separate between the roles, because my father would carry me on his back and would cook for us. And so those are some of the experiences from childhood. And I grew up with boys mainly from a young age, and then girls in my home came later in life. And growing up in a traditional community, both my mother and my father attended the traditional meetings that were called in the community. And my mother has always been vocal, and she has never she told me this one, and whenever there's something that needed to be said, my mom was never afraid to say it, and she never would lose the opportunity to say and express her feelings. And I'm grateful that to us as the siblings, then that is one of the things that she has left us with. And so in the traditional meetings, in the traditional councils, then all members of the community would attend, and my mom was always known as the vocal one, and she earned the respect of men in that respect. My father would only speak like when he would always reserve himself for when it seemed like the things were getting tougher in the discussions. But then working in the local government sphere, and referring to traditional leadership generally and our experiences as leading communities, because traditional leaderships are part of the communities that are a composition of what makes up a municipality, because the municipality is made up of council, at the administration, and the community. And key to what the African traditional community in the context of South Africa has been that traditional leadership is really has been mostly over time be seen as the dispensers of patriarchy, and traditional leaders would of course as custodians of custom and culture would then kind of share views on culture, on what should happen, as already expressed in terms of dress, in terms of how women should appear and how men should appear, and the roles that they should play in the community. And over time, I have learned that actually that becomes so embedded in the women's minds that women themselves become enablers of patriarchy by um, oppressing each other in terms of culture, in terms of dress, in terms of general conduct in the community. It would be women that would say when a woman is widowed, they would be the ones that would pile in the heat of the winter. They would pile warm rugs on her so that the woman is covered, and the woman is behaving in a particular way now because the husband is gone. It is women, it is not men that say women must do that, or that a wife should dress up like that. It is women that would be leading on the attack against a woman's estate that has been left by the husband for the children. It would be women in the family that would actually be the ones that would be contesting, even taking over the custodianship of the children. And so in my experience with traditional leaders is that they've so I mean the system of patriarchy has been so embedded in our society that for the longest time women thought it okay, and it is women that will always even say, but look, he's inviting trouble. And it is women that would ask when a girl is harassed or a woman is harassed or even raped sometimes, the first question is, what did you wear? Women are not responsible for men's behavior, and so women should not be made to account on how they dress. And because in the African in South Africa, most of the cultural regalia, the Zulu culture, the Xhosa culture, and some, it practically shows women with barely wearing anything. But sometimes that is used for the entertainment of men, which is unfortunate. And so we're working very well with traditional leadership, and we are excited that we are part of now looking into the transformation of the traditional leadership. As we have experienced and witnessed, all of us in South Africa, the election for the first time of a woman traditional leader, Umama Nkosikazi Mhlauli. And if you follow her, she has been able to break the the back of patriarchy and what you may call the because Mama Ngosikazi Mahlangu lost her husband at a young age, but her community trusted enough to take over traditional leadership, which was something that was kind of new in her era. But she led, and then she, in 2002 already, led in the House of Traditional Leaders in the Eastern Cape as a woman in her right. And she continues to this day to lead her community. And now she's leading the country in the traditional leadership. And so that for us gives us hope that there is transformation happening slowly but surely in the traditional leadership, and that is going to influence, and it is beginning to influence communities as well. And so, yeah, I'm happy to know that as Salga, we are working with the traditional leadership, and that we are partners with Imbumba Yamakoskaza Komkulu. Also, women who have learned to recognize themselves as leaders, not just as behind their men, but as leaders in their own right who can lead community programs as women. And so we encourage that a great deal in Salga. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you. And you have said a mouthful. I think, you speak of the distortions that are there culturally, which is in the what Ntate Bafana was also saying, that people come with their own, conceptions of or ideologies, and they want to impose those on all of us. And we need to really dismantle such practices. The last panelist to introduce herself is Advocate Kambula. One of the ways we know that we live in a patriarchal society is the laws that we have. For the longest of time, our laws, have favored men. I know my mom, when she got married with my father in 1978, their marriage was automatically in community of property. And, at that time, she was the one who was working, but their house is registered under my dad. Everything that comes in my dad's name. And after he passed, she had now to move everything back to her name. And it's so costly, to move assets into your name after your husband has passed, or even after divorce. And we've seen how in law, women became like children to their husbands. You can't open a bank account without the husband's signature. All these things, uh, again, proving to us that we are living in a society that is very patriarchal, and as Ntate Bafana says, that favors men and give privilege to men. And this cannot be, the situation in 2022. We can't continue in that same pattern. So Mekambule, introduce yourself, and tell us how you see in the law sphere patriarchy manifesting, and what does it mean to us to have these patriarchal laws. We know we are moving slowly into changing these laws, but they are still, put in practice, and very dominant even, in our communities. Over to you, Me.
Thank you, Fina, and thanks for the introduction. And you are right. We are indeed living in a patriarchal society, but now bringing it then to law, as you are saying, that, in South Africa, we have a constitution. And this is a constitution that has been heralded as one of the most liberal in the globe. It is a constitution actually that promotes and protects the concept of feminism as well as gender equality. You find that in section 1 of the constitution, it says it protects then the value of of non-sexism. If you talk about non-sexism, sexism in particular is a notion, and a belief system that one sex, all right, is inherently superior to the other, to its counterpart. And that then is section 1 of our constitution. It does not promote sexism. So what it means is that if you look at that, when you define sexism, then that's actually a feminism, all right? So it's actually a promotion. Non-sexism is a promotion of feminism. Then you come to gender equality. We have a constitution, section 9, that speaks and entrenches gender equality. And when you talk about gender equality, I mean, it's every person. It says that every person is equal before the law, and you have the right to equal protection and the benefit of law. All right. So then it defines then equality, as the equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms, the right not to be unfairly discriminated on the ground of sex and gender. But then when you are looking then into how is this constitution now lived by the people? Are we really enjoying that? All right. We are not as women in South Africa. So that is why then you find the feminism rising, because when you talk about feminism is a belief system, all right, is an ideology where women take to the streets, all right, and call for women's rights and say that let our rights be honored, be valued, all right, and be respected at every sector of life, all right. And then when you compare that then with gender equality is the call for the equal access, to rights and opportunities, but for all genders, all right? So we have in South Africa then laws that are mostly promoting gender equality, not feminism. Gender equality, in the sense that we have pieces of legislation that are non-gendered, all right, that are not saying that, all right, then I'll make an example of the Domestic Violence Act, including the Amendment Act that has just been promulgated in January. So you have a situation where we have laws that says that, okay, both females and males can be victims of domestic violence, all right? So what it means is that it is a law that promotes gender equality. You have the Criminal Law and Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, all right, that also then says in South Africa that men can be raped too, all right? It's not only a situation of females only. So we have laws that are promoting gender equality, all right? But then we need, as women, to promote that feminism, because feminism is a journey to the achievement of gender equality. It is women, shouting and saying that our rights need to be recognized, all right? So we are calling for the rights of women to be respected and valued, so as to be so as to achieve that gender equality. So we are living then in that society, that promotes families that follow a man's name, all right? Because in your family, you are all following your father's name. And why so? It is because of patriarchy. So we need then, as women, not to be the enablers of patriarchy. Because when I'm looking at myself, growing up, with me, in our family, we are all girls, we're three girls, and I've never seen my father, cooking food for us, because there was that role classification in the family that it's a kitchen is a woman's place, all right? And I saw my mother being the enabler of that ideology, all right? It is me now growing up and seeing this, no, this is not right. And that moved me then to be an activist, for the rights of women. So I think that I will end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate. You actually touch on something that recently I've been talking about in some spaces. When you get married as a woman, so I am Fina Godisang, my academic achievements are listed under this name, Fina Godisang. This is a brand. Then I fall in love. I meet Bafana Kumalo. I fall in love. And then we agree that no, we are going to get married. Then all of a sudden, there's no longer Fina Godisang. There's Maleseho Kumalo. So it's an erasure. And I think, for me, I feel passionate about it, that we need to fight this erasure, because then it becomes an inconvenience. Now you must prove that Fina Kodisang and Maliseho Kumalo are the same person, just for giving your heart to someone, for falling in love. And now you no longer exist as you now become replaced by
You
somebody
lose your
else.
identity. Yeah, you lose your identity through marriage. But fortunately, in South Africa, because of our Section 9 of the Constitution, so now we have a situation where a woman will choose whether you want to follow the name of your husband or not. So that's why you find that we have the double barrel last names, or you are still continuing with your name and you become not MISS, you become MS. When you are MS and you have your last name, you are retaining it. So it's one positive thing, that we have earned from the democracy and the constitutional imperatives of our country. But then,
Yeah.
as I'm saying now, is that as women, we must stop being the enablers, of patriarchy. It's happening at our homes, in our boardrooms, we fight for the rights of women. But when you get home, now you are like this. No, I need to be somebody else. That is actually saying that, girls, this is how you should be doing, and promoting those role classifications that make women, to be subjected to servitude, that glorified slavery of women, that you need to cook, you need to clean, you need to do this, and your man is just sitting there and watching TV. That must end. So feminism, we need to put our fist up, and promote feminism at every environment. So as I'm saying that, it's a vehicle of the voice of women towards the achievement of gender equality. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And now we can open the floor to having a broad discussion, now that we've had, the intersecting way, patriarchy is affecting our lives, through religion, through culture, in law. And we are all, I think, saying today, we need to move, we need to push a transformative agenda that helps us change the status quo, where we challenge the distortions that are there in law, the distortions that are there in religion, in culture, and in other spaces. Yvette, I want to come to what you said. You provoked, and I saw somebody agreeing with you there, when you made that comment. That patriarchy reproduces itself, and we find that in feminist spaces, some feminists, or the way feminism is done using patriarchal tools, if I understood, or and paraphrasing what you were saying, and that is why it becomes entrenched, because we are just copying, we are taking a copy and making a copy of a system by and changing it just by putting in front feminism instead of patriarchy, but the pattern is the same, and you also were very bold to say locally a black man is the problem. Let's talk about that. How is a black man a problem? And in that same vein, how do we change this problem?
Yeah, I mean, Fina, it's clear you've mentioned how we've met, and I'm not palatable. I'm not palatable to a lot of people, and because of my voice, because of my views. So what will happen when patriarchy, and I don't want to say men, because there are women that are patriarchal themselves, because they reinforce and they entrench. I mean, so many of our speakers mentioned how patriarchy is entrenched by women. So what happens is when a woman speaks out with a bold, strong voice, she is then alienated to say, no,
Yeah.
this one, she does not she does not behave the way. And most of the time people would look at this duke and say, oh, all right. And then when I open my mouth, something else comes out, and I am not palatable. But what patriarchy does is make us feel women with strong voices are rude, they are violent. I've never beaten anybody, but I swear to God, people carry on as if I'm the most dangerous human being in society, because I speak my voice and I'm not afraid of that. And so people choose women or support women who are not too loud, who won't rock the boat too much. And that is why, for me, women in leadership, in political leadership, in leadership where it's comfortable, they don't impress me. Because if you
Yeah.
are there, you're not doing anything. If you were doing anything to change the system, if you're threatening to change the system, what would happen? You would not be in the corridors. You would not, I always say, you would not, blend in. You would always be seen as the rude girl, the girl who we're going to have to stay away from, but we need because we are supposed to do certain things. So
Yeah.
that is one of the ways where patriarchy, manifests itself. When it comes to men and black men, they usually say to you, I mean, you are too loud, or you are not marriage material, like how many meters of material do you need? So it is important for us as women to do what we do intentionally. We cannot tiptoe around the system that we want to dismantle. So you cannot say, uh, and I'm going to make a very difficult and hard example. What Russia is doing in Ukraine is showing that Russia is not playing games. When you dismantle a system, you must shake it. People must feel your intention. Wherever you go, Fina, if somebody says they need a speaker, you cannot bring a man and be the only woman on a panel of men, what we call menels. You cannot be okay being the first woman every day, being the first woman who do this and first woman who do that. And men are, and the system, I want to make it clear, it's a system. It's men being comfortable. Bafana mentioned it so nicely. Men being comfortable in a space where they literally have to do nothing, but the system works for them. I want to make a clear example of how uncomfortable a system was when we did the total shutdown march. That march was the most pivotal moment for women in this country. It was the system, it was where women were going to change this for everybody in a system that we understood, right? Where our problem lies. It's not in textbook. Please don't talk to me about feminism and mention theory. That March was going to be the most pivotal. But behind the scenes, what happened was the women who were at the forefront, the loudest ones, the founders of this march, were then alienated, and this thing became a theory, a book, what do they call this document that came out of the march? Women were not looking for that. But what happened is the total shutdown was totally discarded. And what we have now is a GBV document, an NSP, National Strategic Plan, that is again theory that women cannot implement. And behind that was women who were getting rid of the loud voices. So the system of how men play women behind the scenes is very, very evident, and we need to be able to be smart about it and not play about it. When I say I support women and young girls, I don't make a joke. I have a group of young women that I mentor, and I will not mentor a boy. Boys don't need mentorship. The system is already there. When he walks into an interview, he's already 10 points ahead because of how a girl is, socialized at home. When she does the interview, already she comes in with the humility. Oh, at least how much can you pay me? 2,000 is fine. Whereas a man is already saying, I'm not leaving. I'm not living with anything less than 15,000. So we need intentional. And when I talk about whiteness and how it also feeds in patriarchy, I've worked in spaces where I've seen white women just come into the system and say, work for 2 days and say Kinyaka promotion. And a young black girl will sit there at reception for years and not see anything wrong. The only thing she's happy about is that she's able to feed her family. So what we need to teach Black women and young girls, it's okay to be angry. There's nothing to not be angry about that at the current system that we are in. So yes, Afina, there's so much that we need to talk about. And I'm glad that you're saying this is a beginning, and I'm happy that Soul City has changed how you do things and have decided to focus on this, because we cannot do this by discussions the one by one. We need to look now at how feminism can support itself. I'm a businesswoman too, and feminist activist businesswoman too, and I use my work to be able to fund spaces where women can talk about feminism, but also get the tools on how to make this practical.
Thank you, Yvette, and I like that you are positioning it to how we should ground it and not just look at it, as something that we hear of or something that we are challenging only in the books. And this is where I want to bring Hlengiwe as an academic, that we speak of feminism and patriarchy, most of us, very high level from an understanding of what the books say. And I said as Soul City, because we've seen that the lived experiences, of young women is influenced by patriarchy. So you have young women who grow up believing that their role is to serve. And this is what they are taught in the home. This is what society is telling them. This is how they are groomed, because if you are not married at my age, you are seen as someone who has failed in life, because why are you not married? And if you behave in a certain way, like someone said, then we say you are not marriage material. So there's a grooming that is done, to young women. And until we go as deep as challenging even that very same practice in the home, we are not going to dismantle this system. So, Dr. Ndlovu, I want you to speak to us. What are we seeing?
Am I the only
what
one
is research
who's
telling us
kinda
about the
disconnected?
trajectory? Are we getting somewhere? is there a shift, or are we still in the same place we were, many years ago, in terms of the gendered roles and the gendered perspective that our societies, especially Black communities, are socialized in?
Thank you, Fina. One of the most painful things about doing feminist work is the realization that the work is not going to be finished anytime soon. Is to realize that the struggle is going to continue for the longest time ever, because this has taken centuries and centuries to make patriarchy. However, at the same time, we shouldn't ignore the work that has been done by women who've come before us. For instance, the work of the women of 1957. It's some of the most important work that has been happening within the feminist spaces, whether you want to call it whatever type of feminism, but any form of work that works towards gender equality. It's important work, and now we have these spaces and these privileges where we can a platform where we can continue our struggles, because there is a generation of women ahead of us who've done the work, that allows us to speak with the voice that we're speaking in today. But also in our everyday, it begins with us in our small tables. So I always say feminist work, it's a constant work, even though it's a drop in the ocean. But the fact that now you can't just speak noma kanjani nje. You need to check yourself, even around the people that you are sitting with, whether you are being politically correct, whether that adds something to the transformation agenda. It does not really matter, but the consciousness that you have around the thinking of you can't just talk just like that as you used it to during those times. For me, that's progress. But also it begins with us from our small tables, from our dining room, tables where we sit with our family members. The little things that we say to the boy child that we're raising, the little things that we say to the girls that we're working with. And because sometimes we're not reaffirming our girls enough, we're not equipping them enough, but also the process of unlearning patriarchy is a very, difficult work, because when you unlearn something, it means you are undoing something that we have always known. You are working against something that we've always believed in. So raising boys in a way that undoes patriarchy in the everyday is very key to me, but also making the spaces very uncomfortable, even for the patriarchal princesses, because we need to be deliberate, we need to be intentional about ways in which we dismantle patriarchy. So one example that I've witnessed in my own work, ethnographing young women headed towards the 2017 ANC's National Congress. Women, unbelievable so, who are working on organizing nice, beautiful girls, whatever that means, as friends of delegates. So this is a whole quantum that's going to be filled with young, beautiful girls who are going to the conference, and they are friends of the delegate, and adapt as part of the entertainment because they have to, entertain the voters there. But also, if we're believing in a justice society and an equal society, why are we not having also equally whatever handsome men who are going to entertain women, or members of the LGBTQ plus community who are going to entertain the delegates, the voters? It shows our biasness towards, and also our support of patriarchal societies, and how patriarchy keeps on reproducing itself. So I think Pumla Gola in her work also does that in a very beautiful way. The need to isolate those who are making patriarchy thrive, those women who play the role of protecting patriarchy, who play the role of even aiding patriarchy to reproduce itself in different ways. The women in the boardrooms, we know it's a very difficult task speaking in a loner voice. So you're just that one person in the boardroom, and you are against this whole group who believes in patriarchy. It's not easy, to make the necessary noise there. But the fact that, those who are sitting around the table, they will understand that you're not going to let things go just like that. You're going to disrupt. The fact that they have to check themselves before they utter anything, before they vote against a woman leader who's supposed to come on board, a woman leader who's supposed to take a leadership position. For me, that's necessary work that we supposed to be doing. And also the role of men in even participating, but also helping in the process of unlearning the work of patriarchy, like Pastor Bafana said, talking about the household where he grew up in, because sometimes it's in these households where we learn patriarchy, where we get to be socialized in most problematic ways, where young boys from a very young age, they grew up believing that they are the men of the house without necessarily knowing and understanding the responsibilities of being a man of the house. Because if you're a man of the house, and then you have a responsibility to protect, but at the same time, those who need to be protected, they have to be protected against you as the protector. Those are some of the difficult things and most problematic things that we encounter every day. We sit with colleagues who are very gender biased, who are very insensitive around our women colleagues. And we, as women in the house, the fact that we make that environment comfortable for them to say they can say whatever that they want to say about a woman who's in a leadership position, without realizing that the system in itself, in most cases, it is anti-women. It is anti any woman who raises their words, who raises their voice when they are speaking. But also we cultivate those spaces and make the spaces hospitable for people who are perpetuating patriarchal forms of thinking and patriarchal ways of structuring society. So for me, it begins with us in our little corners, in the everyday work that we do to make the spaces uncomfortable for patriarchal ideas, for making patriarchy thrive amongst ourselves. So that's one of the most important things for me, to do activism work in an everyday, no matter how small it is, but wake up in the morning and do something, towards a just society.
Yes. So a journey of 1,000 miles begin with the first step. So we must take the first step. Karen Hart had put a question there, and I wanted to bring Dateba Fana in, because he works with men and boys, Kosonke. If we can find that question where she was saying, what are the practical ways we could actually, talk to boys and men about why patriarchy does not serve them, and I think because we identified that the church is the biggest culprit in this, how do we begin to have conversations like this in the church with men of the cloth? How do we challenge, what is being said on the pulpit using the Bible? Because then, as we alluded, you can't question the Bible. I always say my understanding is that God says, "Come, let us reason together." So I can question God with anything that I feel I need to question, but you are sort of taught not to question that authority. You actually are demonized for doing that. So there's a question here that says, what are the practical ways we can start engaging boys and men? Because if we raise and men or boys today who are going to be men in the future within the very same system, we don't change anything about the system, but we want to change what we say to boys, that no, respect women, treat women as your equals. But the system remains the same in that They will go to a church that tells them you are the head and therefore your word is the last word. The woman must submit to you. And they go through a initiation schools that tells a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old that window the manch, you must now go and you must be given the respect because you are a man, even at age 14, and they start speaking with that authority of being a man. How do we then bring up these boys uh, outside of that system? How do we dismantle this system in that space where we are engaging with boys who we are training to be men in the future? The transformation agenda that we must, bring on when we do the work with boys.
Thank you, Fina. I liked Kate's question, but I also want to link it to, I think, the important intervention that Yvette made earlier. There's always the burden that is placed on women to carry even work that is not of their making. I mean, Yvette is correct. You know, there's no reason why women should be mentoring boys because, that is the responsibility of men. Um, 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 and in this context, I want to refer back to the question that Kate has asked, but I want to buttress it by stating that patriarchy, by the way, colleagues, is not only bad for women. I argue strongly that patriarchy is bad for men. Patriarchy teaches us things that virtually are impossible. I'm told as a man, I must be a provider, I must be a protector. This assumes that I've got the ability and the capability to do these things. And reality shows me that it's not always true. And so we confine particularly young men to these stereotypes that then force them to have to do things that often they cannot do. And then it dislocates them in society because if you are not able then to measure up to those standards that patriarchy puts, then you are a failure. Then you are not able to, to be recognized for that. And what is the backlash of that? We then see men using violence as a way of asserting their manhood. Because if they are not able to provide or protect, what is it that they can do? Then they do the next thing, which is to use violence against those that they think they can overpower. Now, you made an example earlier, and I think another colleague referenced the issue of, how women's bodies are controlled, including what women can wear, where women can walk. When a woman is raped, people ask, why was she out at night? When a man is assaulted, nobody asks, what was he doing at night?
Yeah.
People appropriate it correctly and say, there's a lot of crime, the streets are not safe. Why is this? We need to clean the streets. But when it's women, the fault is with her, that she has actually been accosted. Now, the Bible, Fina, because you started us on this trajectory, the Bible is very clear, and I find it very interesting that Christians, we select, as I said, what we want to follow and what we don't want to follow. Jesus, who is, somebody that all of us hold in high esteem, has very, very clear teachings about this. In the gospel, Jesus says, if you have a problem with your eye that likes to look where it shouldn't be looking, cut it off.
Yeah.
If you have a problem with your hand that likes to touch things that it should not be touching, Jesus is very clear, cut it off. But we never hear these messages in the church because it's assumed that as men, we have a right to look. And therefore, it's women who lead men astray and what have you. But I think my colleague from Salga made a very important observation that traditionally, if you look at, how we wear what is called, I'm talking about now original traditional clothes. I'm not talking about what is adulterated today as traditional wear. I mean, people wore almost next to nothing. But you would not hear that a woman has been raped because she was wearing, something that is, very, very tiny. Why? Because the values and the norms of that time were very clear that you never treat people, with disregard simply because of their gender. And we need to invoke those values in society today to say, and not excuse people who say, no, 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 women are raped because they are wearing miniskirts. Nothing is further from the truth. Rape is never about what women are wearing. If a man wants to rape you, Fina, he will rape you even if you are wearing the longest dress. Rape
Yes.
is about power, it's about control, it's about saying a message to somebody that I control you, I can do what I want with you whenever. Now, to get back to the question that Kate referred us to, now, how do we deal with this? I think we need to do a lot of work, and this falls on us as men. And I challenge men to say it's not enough to say, no, 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 I don't abuse, I don't do these things that you guys are talking about. When you are silent in the context of violence and abuse of women, we are just as guilty as the men who are doing these things. So we as men need to be available for our boys. We need to be available for our girls as well, because girls, evidence shows that girls who grow up with a very healthy relationship with their fathers have a very successful life. They articulate, they do better in their lives, they never allow anybody to run roughshod on over them. So we have a greater responsibility as men, I think, to be available. And somebody asked a question about issues of maintenance. That's a conversation for another day, which is a very huge conversation, because it's easy for men to go around fathering children, but how many of those men take responsibility for the children? Why is it that government must be running around providing support to children because their fathers are absent? And yet these are the same fathers who continue to have lots of liaisons and enjoy lives and be on social media demonstrating how much money they have. But when you talk about them looking after their children, you get all sorts of stories. And in this instance, you also find that employers collaborate, because when women are struggling to even prove that this man is working at this company,
Yeah.
employers hide the information, you know.
Yes.
And this is part of the patriarchal system, which is encroaching into the economy in our lives. And usisi lo welokhuza advocate ophuma kwalokhuza kwa government, I think there's also an issue where our laws assume that when you marry, you take the surname of your husband. I challenge you now, anybody who goes and marry in terms of our civil law, when they apply for the new ID, it will bring out the name of their husbands, even if they have indicated that they want to maintain their name. So we need to not only change the attitude of society, but we need to change our laws, because our laws themselves are encouraging and perpetuating this culture of patriarchy. And this, for me, is the things that we need to do in response to challenging patriarchy, ensuring that we teach our boys as men to respect women, to understand that they must treat women with dignity, that actually respecting themselves starts by ensuring that they treat others as they also would like to be treated. And this is a bigger responsibility that requires men to come to the party and not simply relegate their responsibility of bringing up children to women. It takes two to tango. Women don't make children by themselves. Men must take responsibility for bringing up their children. And we need to go back to churches and say, what is it that we are teaching? We must change the curriculums in the Sunday schools. This whole notion of headship of men in families is a problematic notion. In South Africa, you have a lot of single households which are headed by women. What do you call that family? Do you call it a family without a head? But these are women who are bringing out children many of our leaders today are very successful, and they've been brought up by single women. So what do we mean when we say men are the heads of households? We must even change that language, because it's violence, actually. It denies the role that women are playing every day in families. In my home, for instance, there's no head of the family. We agree with my partner to say, what are the priorities? Where she's got skills and she's got the latitude, she leads, and all of us follow. Where I'm able to take a responsibility for some of the projects that we are taking, I lead and everybody follows. And that is how I understand leadership. Leadership is situational. Leadership is not gendered. Leadership is about who has the capability at a particular point to do a particular activity, and then we support that. And once we begin to remove this notion of understanding of leadership, we are beginning to address the issues of patriarchy, so that we recognize that all of us have a role that we can play as leaders, as we all have the gifts that we can put to bear.
Thank you. And I like that quote. You are saying leadership is not gendered, it's situational. And how I wish that's the understanding we could all have, because then all the notions, that the man is the best leader, even and you made an example of how in when we choose leaders, the women will always be the secretary, and the treasurer, and then the man is the chairman, and even that word alone tells you that even in the design of our world, we never thought of women holding positions of power and leadership, because why don't we just say the chair? Why should it be a chairman? So we see how nuanced these patriarchal, how nuanced it is, and how it's subtle but very evident in everyday life. And you are teaching us so much in Tate Bafana. I think the way we raise boys and girls in the homes is still problematic. You still find homes where a 9-year-old boy is not taught to wash dishes because he has a 12-year, 14-year-old sister who's then assuming the responsibility of, one, preparing the sandwich for this 9-year-old, two, cleaning up after the boy after he has eaten, and the boy is sitting there with his PlayStation, enjoying, being here. And when he feels hungry again, he screams to the sister, please give, the please is also not there. I want bread. I want food. And we see this as parents and we don't call it out. So we must not, and this is what Bell Hooks say, he says, what we do is more important than what we say or what we say we believe. And that's important. It's how we do it and what we do, not what we say. I can come here and say I'm feminist, I believe, in the empowerment of women, but my actions are anti-women, as you were saying, Dr. Ndlovu. My actions would then determine how feminist I am, not how much I say I am feminist. And that's what we need to really challenging ourselves first. We must hold ourselves accountable first before we point fingers. Again, Bell Hooks also says, patriarchy has no gender. So she's agreeing with what we've been saying here, that we find women who are very much patriarchal, who and sometimes I laugh and say, sure, we problematize them, but it's true. When you get married, the women who sit you down is usually borakhadi who, and that's why in their thinking, because ra ela ke remos, and that is why you will see they are the first ones who would come and say my brother's assets when the husband is dead. This woman can't benefit from my brother's assets. They are the ones who are fighting you, and they are the ones, as you were saying, Ausnozi, who will put all this heavy clothing on you in the name of mourning your husband, when men are just given a small cloth here on their shirts to signify that they've lost a partner. But you have to wear black, you don't have to be out, you can't touch people, you can't talk to people, you are isolated, and these practices, even the same Lobola practice, honestly, for me, are things we need to start challenging if we are intentional about dismantling patriarchy. Otherwise, we keep talking about it theoretically, as you were saying, Yvette. If we don't start with just saying, this is how I want to be married. If you want to marry me, if you are putting money up front as a way of buying me lobola, then don't pay that lobola. Let's marry each other. If you pay, I'll pay. Let's exchange these gifts. If we want to equalize, let's exchange gifts. And instead of now you saying you are putting money and therefore you now bought a wife that must change her identity. And you are right, again, Dadebafana, because I know my sister also got married and her intention was not to change her surname, but Go Home Affairs, they recognized, because they had signed, that she's now, using, they actually by default gave her the husband's surname when she had indicated that she wants to retain her surname. So the system is even, entrenched to that level where the computers know that your surname is no longer yours because you are now married, you know. And I'm saying it as a joke, but it's something that is really serious. So, advocate, I want to bring you in because someone mentioned the issue of maintenance courts, and how you see patriarchy, manifesting in that space. If we can find that question, can we bring it here so that we engage a bit with it? If the court system is still not recognizing the burden that is put on women. Like Ndate Bafana was saying, even the companies collude because they hide the fact that this man is working in this company. They hide even the income that they get. So there was a question that says, we see patriarchy in the maintenance court. The act is meant to protect children. Women, I don't know, protect children, protecting men. Women have no protection, yet they are raising children without financial support. It is pushing women further into poverty and economic inequality. Women are told they should be using contraceptives, they should get jobs and take care of their children, yet men are not being held responsible for their sexual behavior and supporting the children. So we see how the law is failing in providing the protection and enabling women to enjoy their freedoms. How do we challenge this? What is it that we need to do to get the law to change and really favor women and children and favor all of us?
Thank you, Fina. What I can say is that, as I have said, that in South Africa, because of the constitutional right to gender equality, we don't have a piece of legislation that is gendered. Even the Maintenance Act is not gendered. It is possible for a man to make an application for the maintenance order against the woman, and vice versa. All right. And they both have the reciprocal obligations, to maintain children. So, but the challenge that we have in our country is, it starts in the family. There is no one who is born a rapist, no one who is born irresponsible. No, there's no one who is born irresponsible. It's a learned behavior, and it starts from a home environment. And if we can move into having programs that are focusing on family rehabilitation, so that we restore the values of respect in a family, the values of equality in the family in all areas, all right? It's not only about gender equality, but to ingrain, the value of equality in every area, particularly in decision makings and so on. So we need to have that. And now we are faced with a situation where there is this culture that says that then it is men who are expected to be economically empowered than women, all right? And this is happening in a situation where we also have the Employment Equity Act in our country that is promoting then that gender equity, at the employment space, all right? So we as women need to move from that culture that is promoting that men, you are actually the male dominance in every sector, all right? So now coming to our courts, all right? I'm getting this question and I'm quite shocked, all right, that says that even I'm not sure whether it says that women at our courts were saying that go and take contraceptives, or is it a social construct that we have, but is to say that the legislation is actually permitting that woman, even the woman herself, to be maintained by the husband, depending then on the financial circumstances of the two parties, all right? And this is also a matter that is also even promoted in relationships that are experiencing violence, that is the domestic relationships that are experiencing violence. If you go and make an application for a protection order, all right, and it has a provision there that says that then if you have children, or if you as well, you need your partner then to support you financially, there is an order that can be made, all right, for you, to be supported by your spouse, all right? And until such time, then the maintenance court issues a maintenance order, all right, against the same respondent, all right? So then we need then to look at how we are socializing our children, how we are the values that we have in our families and so on, because these are the values then that you see them now being imported then at the court environment, because that magistrate who is issuing that order, we do not know what is in the mind of that person. We have the law that is written in black and white, but then the problem is with the implementation of that particular law, because the law does not implement itself, it's implemented by people. So then if you have a person then who is a judicial officer who has a patriarchal attitudes and belief systems, we will see that also in the decision and the judgments that are coming out of that person, all right? So we have that challenge, all right, of you cannot let a person to leave your attitudes at home, all right? So that is why you find that at our service points, at our courts, we find the people, are experiencing a secondary traumatization, secondary victimization, despite the training that is being provided. It is because of the fact that the attitudes that are in the home environment where the poison is, all right, because it is the home that is a breeding space of patriarchy, all right, and then that gets then to other sectors of life where people then are found themselves at the working spaces, all right. So that's what I want to say in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are having chats on the side, and the Bafana is actually saying something very profound here, and I want to bring you in before Ketla go and Ausnozi, on the issue of Lobola. because before we went to the advocate, I raised the issue, shouldn't there be then an exchange, the woman and the man exchanging, not just looking at it as if it's just the man who's coming to buy. That's Bafana, please reflect on the comment you made there in our chat, because I think that's very profound and something we need to look at moving on as societies.
Yes, thanks, Fina. In fact, I think Nozbele has raised another important question in this relation. The problem with culture is that we have not written our culture. And so others are now defining what they think our culture is about and distorting it. And so we see a lot now of aberrations that do not really represent who we are. I have argued that, yes, we need to interrogate this thing of lobola, because I sometimes hear men saying, no, I paid for you. There has never been a paying of any human being, even in African culture. When you pay lobola, you don't even pay lobola, it's exchange of gifts. Even the language that we use, is very, very problematic. And the point I'm making there, Sisfina, is that we need to, obviously, even as we interrogate these cultural practices, but interrogate it appropriately in terms of what it is, so that we then can critique and improve it and allow it to grow. Because all cultures must grow. No culture must be static and be frozen in the past. But my recollection is that, when you go as a man to go and lo kgopela sekgosa metsi, you are actually asking for a friendship and a relationship to this family. And so you exchange these gifts as an acknowledgement of your own commitment to make sure that this relationship is, managed appropriately. And so when you then marry, you are now joining that family as part of the family. In other words, you now become a member of the family. So these aberrations where people now abuse and say, no, kauru squeezer, you must do washing, you must cook, is really devoid of any cultural practice. And the point that I'm making is that when a woman comes to the home, she brings things that are building the home. In my calculations, and I've done a lot of these reflections, women actually bring more to the relationship. If you quantify it, you find that even the lobola was basically, very, very minimal in comparison to what the woman brings into the building of the home. And my last point, culturally, you were always told that a woman will retain her name. That's why my partner, for instance, is not Makumalo, because that is wrong. Makumalo is a daughter, my daughter, or my sister. My wife is Mamulife, because even though she's married to our family, she never loses her identity, because we have never bought a human being. We have exchanged gifts and extended the relationship so that when she moves to this family, she's being treated as part of this family, but she retains who she is in her dignity and needs to therefore be treated as such all the time. And I think these are the things that we need as we engage with this. Whether we like to retain lobola or not, that's a separate conversation. But I think we need to ensure that we do not allow others to define our culture to a point where we ourselves no longer know who we are, where we come from, because we will never know then where we want to go if we have missed the point of where we are coming from. Thank you.
Yeah. And Yvette, is that the point you wanted to raise? Did you want to come in on the Lobola issue as well?
No, not so much around the Lobola issue, but the maintenance issue. And it's important for us to know that the justice system has never been fair. And it's exactly when I say how outside it impacts the people in the home, right? So when we talk about I'm a little bit distracted by the question on the screen, but men say we raise young boys in the homes, and when we all made our opening remarks, none of us were in a patriarchal home, except Prof. No, the advocate, who said her father didn't cook. Most of us have parents who cook and men who are cooked. So where does this come from? It's the system outside their home, and it's where it's perpetuated. But when it comes to the justice system, please, the big thing there is role clarification. So the person with their patriarchal attitudes go into the justice system with that same attitude towards a woman who's already struggling. I do not understand for the life of me how a man can kill a woman and get 15 years, and after 5 years be given parole, where we have today evidence of many women who've killed their abusers, rightfully so, and viva to them, who are in prison for life and will not see the day of life. One of the reasons why I don't work in prisons, Fina, is that system. It's so depressing, it's oppressive when you see women like Sis Martha in there who has killed her abuser. I know young girls who speak about how they killed their rapist, and they are the ones who got life sentences in this country. So we this justice system is just a theory. I want to pull my hair out when somebody talks about just how progressive our constitution is and how it makes things better. That's the most depressing constitution, because you had apartheid and you had the ANC against each other. The ANC did not want to see in the constitution what the apartheid system used against them in the law. So they made certain things go away. And we will forever pay for that as women. And the fact that men do not pay maintenance because of equity and equality. But Malumba Fana say it so well, that when women bring in so much, I'm already taking care of this child. When the child is sick, I go and sit at Tembisa Hospital the whole day. I make sure this child goes to school. The only thing I remember in my own case, my partner, who has not even paid 1 cent, told me, Bona, I'm going to say I can only afford 250. And I did not want to take myself through that embarrassment. I struggled with my daughter, but it's because the system allowed. We are the worst in the world. South Africa is disgusting. Gender-based violence because of men. The fatherless children, it's up to 72% of children do not know or live with their father in the house. It is a disaster, and we cannot continue to be okay with it. How do we fix it? In America, you don't pay maintenance, Baulata. They don't care if you are Puff Daddy or you are who, or you are Kanye West. They will fetch you. When we talk about 50-50, what do we mean? How do we install that? But yeah, we have a lot to unpack, Fina, but I just don't want it to be a talk. I want it to go to the justice system. When we talk about transform the justice system, we don't just talking about getting rid of men, getting rid of white judges. We're talking about getting rid of these patriarchal princesses who also speak about, I remember there was a judge who said, rape is part of our culture, our rite of passage as Black girls, that we will be raped by our fathers. And this person was practicing. It is disgusting. We need to do something very real about this system called patriarchy.
Wa re trigger-a. Yeah, no. And you are right. There's so much in the system that is not what is on paper. The paper says something else, but in practice, we are practicing something else because, as you say, we bring in our own belief systems into, what the Constitution provides. And somebody said, if the Constitution is as liberal as it says, why do we still criminalize sex work, when women are trying to provide for their children? Why is the system not, seeing that as an injustice for the children of those women, who are doing that work? And also, why is it that ukutwala is still a practice that is acceptable in culture and we are not criminalizing it? And this is where I wanted to bring you, Ausnozi, to say, what are we saying about these practices, that culturally are acceptable and no one of us is even questioning it, and even the boys who die in the mountains for the sake of being men, their penises being chopped and, some being castrated, but they'll still go because being a man is as important, is so important to them than just being a human being who lives at peace with everyone. What is being done to challenge these cultural practices, and what should be done, as we now look at practical ways we can engage with what we've raised today? What is being done? Which door should we knock at to challenge
Yeah.
them?
Fana, Bafana mentioned a very important point here to say our society used to have values that bound the society together, and that guided how families would live with each other in harmony, so as to bring about a harmonious society. What has happened over time is the distortion of both our values and norms as a society through the distortion of our culture and customs, and the interference by those who don't even understand our culture and customs, and of course the evils of the open society that open everything to everyone. I'll start with the custom of ulwaluko, a traditional custom that is practiced in most African countries. And the intervention that is being made, in fact, let me start with the distortion of the culture, of the custom. The fact that in order for a boy to be strong and survive, he must survive being there without drinking water. And thus hydration is a sign that you're strong, dehydration rather. And you find that our boys will practice not drinking water for 2 weeks before they go to the mountain. And by the time the custom is performed on them, they are dehydrated and already at risk. And they are not expected to drink water, something again that is not part of our custom. It is part of a healing process that should be managed there. The intervention that is made at a local government level, with municipalities working with traditional leaders and the Department of Health, and it is to actually establish initiation forums across all the districts, in particular in the Eastern Cape, where the death of the initiates is rife. And so the initiation forums would go and actually be made composed of teams with doctors, nurses, and traditional leaders that would actually go and visit all the initiation schools to ensure that the right ways are done. And they even bring water, because most of the time it is in the height of summer where it is already scorching hot. And so dehydration is the main cause. And that is just the first aspect. And then the second aspect is what is expected of boys, because women give birth to these boys, raise them for 18 years, hand them over to men for 2 years, for 2 weeks, and they die over a custom that the men are poorly managing, because they're allowing even the influences of Otsotsi from the community who go and visit those initiation schools and mess up with the boys. You have your boy coming home, and a creature that you don't even understand, in the name of manhood and what is expected of a man to behave, and they totally change as the son you raised over the 18 years, over a period of 2 weeks. And again, in terms of how we as parents introduce alcohol to our children, it is so wrong. They go to the mountain drunk, so that they don't get to experience the pain, and then when they come home, they're celebrated with alcohol, and there is that thing that women call amabele, They go bephethe ibhotile zotywala, like that type of alcohol is not part of our culture, and it is destructive. And then you then say that we have a problem. So men must take charge of the custom of Olwaluko and must change the narrative that has dominated the culture, wrongfully so. And it has also spread out across all rural areas. It is wrong. Boys kill each other going to the custom. Some of the boys actually kill themselves if their mothers won't buy the alcohol to celebrate before they go, where they bring in lots and lots of alcohol and it be drunk for days. It's something that has been normalized in our communities. And if a family is poor and the mother or father can't afford to buy that amount of alcohol before the boy goes, then the boy would kill themselves or be ostracized by the other boys. And even accused, even after Umgidi, as not men enough because there was not enough alcohol produced by the family. And so men must man up and own up our culture and restore the values and customs, working with traditional leaders. In fact, traditional leaders leading that. Then on the custom of Ugutwala, well, I think traditional leadership has also been made aware that this is wrong, that girls deserve the right to go and to school and finish their school and pursue careers of their choice. But Ukutwala actually takes young girls who are even younger than 18. Before they finish their school, they're taken to be made wives. And they're made to marry a man that they do not know, and they're even forced to sex. And it happens in some of the culture of the traditional communities, and that has to come to a stop. Girls, just like boys, deserve to finish school, deserve to pursue a career of their choice, and deserve to decide when they want to get married. They can't be made as child child brides when they can't even make a decision on what they want in their life. So it needs, again, the restoration of our values and customs, because whatever reason there was that parents would have to allow their girls to be abducted in that fashion, that was wrong. And it's time that society understands that that is oppression and abuse of the girl child. Then I think generally our norms and values as a society, in particular the African society, have been so distorted that we then begin to undermine what they used to stand for. So we must then start to teach each other those values. Whoever Bafana, who could lead such campaigns, working with traditional leaders. I think the society is now open. We are tired of what is happening, and we must all do something. I like what the advocate raised to say, maybe we must advocate feminism for all, that we must move beyond just gender equality and being gender activists, but we must move to be feminists. And that would mean that we lead or raise a sexless society, a society that sees a human being first before they see a boy or a girl, a woman or a male. And they see a human being that is capable of achieving anything whenever they want, supported by the society. Thank you, Fina.
Thank you. And I like what Mateboho is saying to the point you made, to say, then as mothers, we must be the one who stop celebrating imigit, because we are the ones who buy this alcohol. We are the ones who support and actually celebrate this cultural practice that gives these boys, or that initiates these boys into this toxic behavior and toxic masculinity. So what is our call to action as we wrap up? What is it that we are then saying? What do we want to start doing for us to begin to dismantle patriarchy? We've raised so many things that are problematic, but we want to act, because we can speak for days about what the problem is. What is the solution? What do we do? What is the mandate we are giving ourselves as social activists, as gender activists, as people who find this system problematic, and we are tired and we want change? COVID showed us that, and this is what Yvette was saying, that When you disrupt, you are not playing nice. You don't play nice. You come in and you disrupt, because disruption is not about asking, can I do this? Are you going to be okay if I change this? No, you come in and you change what doesn't work. So how do we then begin to disrupt? So we're going to start with you, Yvette, and end with you, Hlengi. So Yvette, we want a call to action for all of us. Where do we begin? What do we do? What is the next step from here?
Yo, Fina, if I was anywhere else, I would have said this up. So we will not do that. First of all, the financial emancipation of women. Women are vulnerable because they are not able to participate in the economy fairly because of patriarchy. So when we do our things and when I do my work, one of the things is I am intentional about making a woman a priority. I always say to people, even when we go to interviews, when you are intentional with an interview and number one ki munna, number two ki musadi, take number two, because Banna already have a step ahead. So for me, the emancipation of Black women, of young girls is important, because only when you are part of, if you have equity, if you are able to provide for yourself as a woman and a girl, will you be able to express yourself and take up space in society. You don't see vulnerable children, and some of these things we do so intentionally. When kids are, when we do end of the year and we praise kids who are doing well, go to the schools where there's a number one in the village, bring their child out in the village and show the world that young people in these spaces can do this. But what we get to see is the people who already have, the have-nots are not praised, will go to Harvard, while Smang Mang Limpopo under a tree, who studied and got for all 7 distinctions, is struggling to get in a university in South Africa. What about Harvard? So let us be intentional about changing what we do and disrupt everywhere you go, whether it's in church, whether it's in your workplace, whether it's in business. Me, I have a business. My business is school. At the shop where I have and sell dresses, I sell feminine dresses. I sell gender non-conforming clothes. I sell body positive clothes, which means I don't talk about all of these negative things that we bog ourselves down. Be intentional about your stuff. And for a system to be dismantled, you have to destroy it. And we cannot play nice with patriarchy if we are not dealing with the things that we are saying are issues in our families, are issues in our society, and prevents women to live a fulfilled life. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Let's go to Advocate. Advocate, what is our call to action? How do we dismantle, knowing the gaps that are there in law, knowing that, the law itself is still not, feminist, as you were saying, all of us should move towards feminism. How do we change that, and what practical things do we start doing now to at least get to some solution?
Thank you. I would like, just before I can respond to this, to say that we have made a groundbreaking amendment in the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, where then the women who marched in 2018 were demanding that all women be protected by the National Register for Sex Offenders. And what we have done, which I believe that is going to be challenged by the courts. Remember that any piece of legislation that is passed by Parliament, it is subject to being the constitutionality thereof challenged by the courts, because courts also make law. So, but we have included something very boldly there to say that to define then a vulnerable person, okay, I'm not actually supporting the word vulnerable, but then we found that the country is actually in favor of this word vulnerable. And we said that then any female person, all right, for the first time, any female person who is below the age of 25 years, who is in an educational institution, tertiary institution, working in a tertiary institution, or living in that space, may, if raped by, if becomes a victim of rape and the perpetrator is convicted, will make them the convicted sex offender not to be permitted to work in an environment that will be exposing him to that environment, or to persons, to children, persons with mental disabilities, and also to work also in an environment that is in the educational environment. So, but we boldly included a female person, because if you read our legislation does not have he or she. It does not have. It does not, as I said, that it does not promote non-sexism, despite the fact that the Constitution is founded on a value of non-sexism, all right? So, but we are waiting as a department as to how the courts are going to be responding to this issue, all right? So, now, getting to, as I'm, my parting shot is to say this. It's something that I have been saying in many platforms. We have, people keep on saying that there are gaps in our legislation. Even with the 3 GBV Amendment Acts, when we were amending them and all, we were like finding that there's a lot that is in these pieces of legislation. The problem is us failing to bridge the gap between paper law and action. It is about us implementing and having the right people with the right mind and attitude to implement the legislation that is passed by our parliament, all right? So, but there's one thing that I would like to raise here, is that we are a country that keeps on criminalizing a number of acts, all right? We are good at criminalizing. If you can ask me as to how many criminals, statutory offenses that we have in our country, I mean, it's a myriad. They're getting countless now, because every piece of legislation that we take out, it criminalizes a particular behavior. Even now, the Domestic Violence Amendment Act, also now, we have aligned it to the Presidential Summit Declaration, which in Article 1 and Article 2 promoting that all persons living in South Africa, irrespective of whether you are a non-national or a national, you must take the responsibility to end gender-based violence. So now the Domestic Violence Amendment Act has got a provision there that places a legal obligation, all right, legal obligation on adults to report any incident of domestic violence that they are aware of that is perpetrated against children, persons with disabilities, and older persons, all right? And it also criminalizes then the non-compliance with that legal obligation. So what it means is that now we have put a provision that says that no to bystanderism in domestic violence matters. We should move away then from that ideology that it is a family matter. Everybody must be involved in ensuring that the child that you see in your neighbor who is pregnant, being 12 years old, you have a responsibility to report that. And a failure to do that amounts to a crime. But now coming to the Constitution, the Constitution is self-conflicting, self-violating. It promotes a gender equality in terms of Section 9, and then you have Section 20, you have section 35 that's got a myriad of the constitutional rights of the accused person, all right, of the suspected, of the detained, of the accused person, all right, that says that then you have a right to apply for a bail, you have a right to remain silent, you have a right, and who's going to be paying for that bail, all right? It is us, our pockets, that will be paying for that, all right? But then it protects the rights of the accused person, a person who has committed a crime. But it is mum when it comes to the rights of the victim of crime. Who is protecting the rights of the victim of crime? So that is why we have a situation where you find that the accused person is coming to the court holding, armed with a constitution, which is the supreme law of the country. And then the victim is coming with a mere criminal procedure act, all right, which must bow down to the constitution. So there is a serious imbalance there. So we will continue having that imbalance in the way in which the courts, the cases are prosecuted and are adjudicated by our courts, because the constitution was put together by a congregation of people who were so angry, who were saying that we want our rights to be protected as the detained and an accused person, but they forgot the rights of the victim of crime. What is it that we're doing in South Africa to bridge that gap? We're coming with the victims' rights, the victims' charter. I mean, it's a charter. It is toothless. So we will continue amending the pieces of legislation and not being able to bridge that gap. What we need to do, what we are doing with section 25 that talks about the rights, the land rights and so on, should be done for section 35 as well. All right? We need to inject the rights of the victim of crime. All right, thank you.
Wow, we learn every day. So we now know, Yvette, where we must now channel our activism, because
Throw it
we have
away.
a
Throw it
constitution
away.
that is celebrated by the world, yet it's not protecting the victims, and the majority of victims being women. It's no wonder then we are not shifting the needle. We are remaining in one position with a beautiful constitution that is celebrated by everyone. Wow.
Everything that is celebrated for a reason, and that is BS most of the time. The world overlaps this constitution, and we have to fight it, praise everywhere where we go. They tell us about this constitution that is feminist. Feminist, my foot.
Yeah. So our call to action is #Constitution must fall, because it's not serving us. It's not serving us, So we are calling on this to fall. Let's relook, our constitution. Hlengiwe, your parting shot. We want to finish by past, so keep it sweet. Your call to action. Are you struggling, Hlengiwe? You are muted. You are muted. Okay, let's go to Ntate Bafana while we try to sort you out. And Ntate Bafana, what is our call to action? With everything said, what do we do?
Well, I think we must continue this conversation and explore more on the actions. I think there are some parts of activities that are already underway. Sonke is part of a faith action consortium that brings together several players that are talking what we are talking about here and calling out faith leaders, particularly on issues of gender-based violence, where people are not doing what they should be doing, and calling them to account. And I think we need to have more of those voices within such establishments, so that there must be no holy cows in our space. We also need to call out traditional leaders, Usis Nosbele made a reference to the issue Yogoluka. And really, we don't have young men that must die simply because they want to be men. It's unacceptable. And part of the call that we have made, at least in my other life at SANAC, we have been calling for government to, strengthen a legal framework that will ensure that we do away with these binaries of saying women cannot participate in any conversation around issues of initiation. I think for me, it's unfortunate that we women are fine to bring birth and bring life to young men, but we as men can take this life and destroy it because we don't want women to be part of these conversations. It's unthinkable.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't make sense to me. Why is it that mothers should not participate in this custom? As I've said, cultures are never dormant. Cultures grow, cultures develop, they evolve. Women should not just play a role when kwenziwa imigidi. Women must be part of determining what is the curriculum that is taught to these young men as they go to the mountain. What are the kinds of messages that are being given to them? Why is it that a young man can live respecting his mother and comes back and wants to now be treated like indoda, including, on a person that have brought them to this world? Something is wrong there. So we must interrogate all of these things and not allow any holy cows, so that we can change our society so to be the better society that we want it to be. We can only do that if we are all honest to ourselves and leave no stone unturned, and no subject must be left unattended to, so that we can build the society that we want and build that alternative world that we all want to see, where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. It is possible, it can be done.
It is possible and it can be done. And it starts with having conversations like the one we are having. I see that Hlengwe is no longer with us, and I see that Unozibele is taking a call. Let me wrap it up by saying one of the things that I want to commit to is that, in the same way, every year we go and we convene to look at how we are doing in terms of HIV response in our country. I want us to get to that point where we convene, ever so often to look at how are we doing in getting to an equal world? How are we doing in getting to a world where we have removed the bias, we have dismantled patriarchy? And it's convenings that we should have regularly, where we check, what is happening in practice, what is the legal framework that supports that practice, how are we, changing the laws, and how are we changing the practices. We can only do that if we know what is happening, and we need to really meet as people who are passionate about changing the system, convene and come with evidence of what is happening and what we can do to change that. So I want people to come on board to support that we continue having these conversations, but convene in large groups, to challenge the practices, Tsabo initiation, the practices Tsabo Lobola, the practices, the constitution itself, and that requires commitment. And I'm committing myself to finding resources to convene us. And we can use platforms like this to start. And as we get into things, we can even go to communities, because that's where we need to challenge the practice. Nosibele, in your closing, keep it short, so that we hand over to the admin to close us out.
Thank you, Fina, and thank you very much, colleagues. This was a very rich conversation, and I totally agree we need a broader discussion. We need to zoom into the issues that we are raising. That would be a build up to the change that we want to see. As we have identified the problems, let us try to zoom into the one problem and try and deal with it. Like, for example, part of what we need to do is, we know the challenges with the family structure and the way the family has changed and evolved over time, and and how society then supports the family. Because if the society fails to support the family, then the family will negatively impact society. And this is the kind of evolution that we have seen over time, that has kind of undermined who we are as a people in the society, and that has allowed all these tendencies to creep in and be entrenched in our way of doing things. And we have to unlearn them. I totally agree. And we need campaigns to do that. So I'm in the bigger discussions and in future discussions going forward. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, everyone, for this robust and eye-opening discussion. And I think, we did say at the beginning, this is just an introduction. We see how big the problem is, and a 2-hour conversation cannot solve the problem. But we need to commit to actually, continuing with the conversation. And we must admit that we are being failed by the leadership of our country, because so many promises have been made, but the delivery is zero if we check. So we need then to take it upon ourselves to provide that leadership. We can't wait for someone to provide the leadership. We are the leadership, we will provide the leadership. And therefore, our call to action is that starting from now, in our corners, we are going to dismantle, and we will, outline throughout the year how we are doing that in bits and pieces, in collaboration with each other through the different platforms that we engage in and where we are doing our work. So thank you so much, everyone who has joined. Continue sending comments, and the panelists, if you are able to go in later and respond to some of the comments, we would appreciate that. But I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us and for opening our eyes to so many things. As an institute, this is what the work that we want to do, is to make sure that for every child in South Africa, we create a thriving environment. And anything that disrupts and anything that takes away that, we are going to disrupt back and dismantle. Thank you very much. Let's learn, unlearn, and relearn, as Busisiwe says. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Fina. Thank you so much. This was
Thank
awesome.
you, Fina. Thank you, Fina. Thanks for
Bye,
the
colleagues.
Thank you, Fina. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you.